Hey guys, what is going on? So I just wanted to talk about a product that I've been using since March, which is the naked body scanner. Now I've seen a couple people talk about this like on YouTube or elsewhere, but it's never like a long-term review. It's just kind of like, oh, this is something that I used for a little bit and this was my experience, kind of like a first impressions type of video. Whereas this is something that I've been using, like I said, since March. It is now November. So I have a pretty good experience with it, and I think where it really shines is its long-term use. So that's why I wanted to make this video. But if you don't know what it is, you know, it's a very niche product and not something I would recommend for most people. But if you are really into fitness, it's gonna be able to track your body fat percentage, measurements, obviously your weight, and it's gonna show you these over time. You're gonna be able to compare them, and it's gonna be a pretty easy process to just kind of track a lot of things at once. And me being a numbers guy, I absolutely love the idea of this. Now, when I initially wanted it was around March of last year, and I thought, you know, it was a little bit too pricey, maybe something that would be cool, but not something I would necessarily use too much or really get enough use out of. But as I spent a year kind of thinking about the purchase, it really became clear it's something that I wanted. So I decided to go for it, and honestly, it's been very useful for me. And I just kind of want to talk about what I like about it and why I would recommend it, and then just kind of who it is and who it isn't for. Because obviously, most people shouldn't be spending, you know, $1,500 on this. But you know, if you are somebody who's interested in this and you're kind of a more serious athlete or more so kind of like a bodybuilder, I think it can be very useful and absolutely it can be worth the money. So I think the first point I want to make here is that a lot of people are initially just going to look at this and be like, well, I have this scale at home that tracks my body fat percentage. Why do I need this? And I don't know about every scale. Obviously, I haven't tried every one, but I have tried a couple of them. I had one when I was younger, and maybe the technology wasn't as good back then. But I found it to be very inaccurate. And although my perception of what my body fat percentage was back then was probably pretty skewed, it seemed like it was giving not only high readings, but all the readings varied so much between. So it just didn't seem accurate to me. I've used one semi-recently at a friend's house, and we have pretty similar builds, same height, same gender and everything like that. And when I stepped on his scale on his setting, which obviously isn't the optimal way of doing it, it showed that my body fat percentage was 30%. So I think it was actually higher than 30%. Maybe it was like 34, 33, something like that. And I remember thinking, like, why would me being on his setting, even though we have similar builds, why would that say that I was over 30%? Because obviously I've never even been close to that number. Why would it show that? And it just led me to believe that it's doing calculations based on things that you feed it already. So it's not really tracking anything. It's just kind of showing how your weight changes over time. And I understand there's like technology in them, but I really think that it should be able to track your measurement regardless of you putting in certain things. And given that my body was essentially what his body could have been had he just kind of trimmed down a bit and built a little bit of muscle, there's no reason that my number should have been that inflated. And it just, you know, obviously there are a variety of different scales and I can't speak to all of them, but I think these give you a false sense of accurate information, and that's the major problem with these. So I think, in my personal experience, the best way that I've been able to track changes in my body is by using a tape measure. I think using a scale in general is going to give you very little information. Using one of those scales that tracks your body fat percentage, allegedly, is a very misleading thing. But, you know, in terms of tracking your measurements, I think that is generally going to be something that's going to show you where your progress has been made. For example, if you know that you store fat in certain areas, if you increase that area's size, it's probably, if you've been losing weight as well, it's probably muscle. Or maybe if you measure your waist, generally you're not going to add a bunch of muscle to your waist, but you are going to add and subtract fat over time. So certain measurements like that are much more accurate in showing changes in body fat percentage and just muscle gain and stuff like that. So what this scale does is takes the 3D image of you and tracks all those measurements for you, as well as giving you an estimate of your body fat percentage based on the model that it takes of you. So this is obviously not the same way that something like a DEXA scan or some of those like underwater ones. There's different ways of estimating your body fat percentage, but they are all that. They're all just estimates. Now, for me, I don't have the money to go and get DEXA scans all the time. And obviously, even though this was $1,500, that's a one-time purchase that I'll never have to make again. And I could potentially sell it if I found that, you know, I didn't find it super useful, or if I stopped being super conscious of any type of body fat percentage change. But DEXA scans and stuff like that are obviously going to rack up a much higher bill over time. And they're going to use a different method. And I would probably guess that DEXA scans are going to be more accurate. But something like this is going to be much more accurate than any type of scale that you're going to get. And you're going to get all those measurements as well that, again, certain types of scans are going to give you, but those are going to add up over time. And I don't even know how much those cost. But if you're taking scans every week or every month, obviously, it's going to be the cheaper option to get the body scanner. So the way that I see it, it's about the convenience, and if you're going to continuously use it, and the price. And I think that's really something that you have to consider. And for me, it's really led me to be able to show what kind of progress I was making, whether it be weight loss, weight gain, muscle gain, whatever it may be. And it's allowed me to optimize my bulking and cutting cycles. And I think that's really what this should be geared towards. So obviously, if you are, you know, a competitive bodybuilder, this would be extremely useful for you, even if it's not the only method that you use to track your progress. It'll be very useful in showing if you are losing muscle, where you're losing your fat, stuff like that, and your measurements and all that other stuff. But if you're somebody like me who is constantly bulking and cutting, it's going to give you a very good idea of how successful your bulk or cut is, and if you are making progress, or if you should maybe cut it off at a certain point because you stopped seeing the results that you wanted. So a couple examples for me, I was doing a pretty aggressive bulk, hoping that I could build some muscle, even though I'm kind of more advanced, so muscle gains are going to be slower for me. When I was bulking, I found that maybe in the beginning I was gaining a little bit of muscle, but after a certain point I was just putting on fat and not gaining any muscle. At least that's what the scans were showing. My strength wasn't progressing, so that kind of seemed to be in line. And it basically showed that even though I was on this very aggressive cut that I was willing to continue, I cut it short because I wasn't seeing progress in muscle gain, I was just gaining fat. So had I not known that, I would have just said, hey, I can see that I'm getting bigger, I can see that my measurements, you know, my arms are getting bigger. But when you take something like this and it shows you that you're just putting on fat, you're able to stop a cut that's going south, or stop a bulk that's going south, and then stop it and start your cut or do maintenance or whatever you feel like you need to do from that point. I also used it in my most recent cut, which was very, very successful. And I used a variety of supplements and stuff like that, but it allowed me to track kind of what rate I was losing fat, where I was losing it and stuff like that. And it allowed me to be much more educated about where I was heading in either direction. So I found that it was super useful, and I've only been using it since March, but over time I've found that I like having it more and more. And if I'm ever doubting where I'm going in, you know, my progress, or if I am making progress, obviously I can look at my gym numbers, but when I look at this, it just gives me a whole nother set of analytics to be able to see where I've progressed. So I really think if you're somebody who is maybe a beginner and you're going to see some pretty big differences in your body while you're training in the near future, probably doesn't make a lot of sense to get into something like this. And maybe fitness is not something that you're going to continue to do, and it probably wouldn't be a great investment, at least right now. And you could get away with just having a scale or a tape measure or something like that to be able to track your progress, as well as, you know, progress in the gym. I think it's a lot more for advanced athletes who are making very minimal gains, and they need to rely on things other than just, you know, taking progress pictures at the gym or anything like that that have so much variance. So I really think this is for more advanced people, or anybody doing any type of bodybuilding show, where it's really important to know if they are losing muscle, or how optimal their, you know, diet and training, how it's helping them. So that's who I really think it's for. So if you're more of a beginner, there's no need to kind of take this jump. But if you're more advanced, I find it to be super useful, and I would absolutely recommend it. I do think it is worth the price. I'm happy with the price that I paid for it currently. And even if I got it taken away today, I've gotten a lot of use out of it, and I'm happy with my purchase. So just want to throw that out there. I'm not getting any money for this. I'm not trying to sell you this. I just simply want to throw this out there because I didn't really see any long-term reviews, but I think it is a great product and I would highly recommend it. So that's all I gotta say about that. And I will talk to you soon.